Hello, fellow souls with bodies, and welcome or welcome back to the What I've Learned of Magic podcast with me, your host, Morgan Rodheimer. And this is season 2. I left off in March and I haven't recorded since, but leave it to Mercury retrograde to bring you back to old projects, and I am so happy to be here and for you to be listening and for us to be in this time together. I appreciate you more than I can say. Well, let's get right into it. This episode is going to be pretty astrologically heavy. That's what I'm trying to say. We are in the middle of a Mercury retrograde. So I was thinking about doing an episode on my personal experience with Mercury retrograde, and as a very Mercury heavy chart having person, I've had to deal with it quite the hard way, but also learned a lot of its blessings. However, we also have recently entered Pluto in Aquarius. And Pluto in Aquarius will be happening for the next 20 years, and I've already been noticing some really big themes. So I feel like as I have chills running all over me, that is going to be the main focus for this episode. And that's probably the title of it, so you already know this. But we're going to be discussing Pluto in Aquarius. Now, for me personally, I have a lot of Aquarius in my chart. I have Saturn, I have my moon, and I have my Lilith all in Aquarius in my third house, which is my mindset, my communication, what's natural to me, like kind of like your neighborhood growing up. That would be your third house, right? Now, what I've been learning about Pluto and its transits through signs, especially as we were closing out the final chapter of Capricorn and moving into Aquarius once and for all, is that it takes what we think of that sign and forces us to flip the narrative on it. So going into this transit, I'm sure a lot of us had ideas as to what it would look like. We have a lot of stereotypes that we understood of Aquarius, and we attributed a lot of our life so far and went, oh, these things remind me of the sign Aquarius based off of how society sees it. Also, it's 11/11 right now. Make a wish. Or maybe that's a sign for somebody. But once Pluto is in a sign, it does not behave normally. It's similar to Uranus, where it adds a uniqueness to it, but the difference is Pluto adds so much depth and restructuring. It takes it and it literally breaks it down on a cellular level to rebuild it again in hopefully a better way. And so we did that with Capricorn, whether it feels like it or not. We have learned every centimeter of Capricorn over the past 16 years. And we are about to learn every centimeter of Aquarius for the next 20 years. And a strange way that has been showing up for me has been somewhat the death of my interest in social media and in the internet. Now, like I said, I have a lot of Aquarius in my chart, and it's supported by a lot of my other placements. I'm a Sagittarius rising, I'm a Gemini sun. I have some other placements too that just kind of like really add and emphasize the Aquarius energy. So I already naturally understand a lot of the stereotypes and study and tropes, etc., of Aquarius on a personal level, and have learned the hard way with that Saturn being there and having gone through my Saturn return already. But what I have noticed, like for instance, let's take TikTok. TikTok started off as a community of misfits, and it was made by a company that was not, well, let's put it this way. I'm an American, so if you're listening in America, then you'll have had the same perspective that I did. But this was an app that wasn't controlled by the US government for the most part, especially in the beginning. It was an app from China, I believe. And there was an element of freedom there, which is very Aquarian, where we could just be as weird and honest and authentic as we wanted without any of like the American censorship that we have on a lot of the other apps like Instagram and Facebook. And I think that allowed us to finally get things off of our chest that we wouldn't normally. If I remember correctly, yeah, because it was during my Saturn return that I started my TikTok account. So even though it didn't get, or it was already pretty popular a year before I had gotten on, it was also, oh, just a second. But the point was that during a very strong Aquarian energy, I and a lot of people during 2020 got on TikTok and found our weird niche communities on there. And then it slowly, over the next 4 years, got more and more regulated by American standards, I suppose, until recently I heard someone talking about how it's basically QVC. And to me, it's like it went from being very Aquarian to now being more Capricorn right as Pluto and Capricorn ended, which has been very interesting to witness and be a part of with this paradigm shift. Because another thing with Pluto is that Pluto moves really slowly. So even though it's helping you dissect a sign's energy from the inside out, it is also lingering and overlapping with the sign it has just been in. You have to think of it as, like the ancient ruins of a country. So you could go to Italy and you could see the Colosseum in Rome, and that is like a previous version of that land. It's still there, that structure still lingers, but we're using it for a different reason now, and it's being overlaid with the future, with the present, and the past is still just little ghosts sort of haunting the present. So that's sort of what's happening with all these apps. And when it came to sort of the death of my interest in the social media that is here thus far, I found it interesting because I was like, I wonder if that has anything to do with the future of this Pluto and Aquarius transit, or if it's based off of perhaps the fact that we have Jupiter in Gemini. So Jupiter is, I think, in detriment in Gemini. Or in fall, I can't remember. It is not comfortable there. It rules the opposing sign, which is Sagittarius, and both of those energies are larger than life. Whereas Gemini is one of the detailed signs, like Virgo. It cares about the quote-unquote smaller things, the things that are more present, and Sagittarius and Jupiter are more about like bigger, better, beyond. And both of them are very, very necessary, but when Jupiter is there, it can be very, very uncomfortable. It could be also a combination of Jupiter being uncomfortable in the present day details of Gemini, trying to find the bigger meaning to smaller pieces of information that are actually just facts, like adding a philosophy to what's real and to what is discussed on a day-to-day basis, sort of making that almost religious just to talk to someone about the weather, versus Pluto in Aquarius. Pluto, well, I talked about this on, I think on TikTok and I'm on Blue Sky now too. See, that's the thing is, I keep going round robin, but it is sort of Mercury retrograde vibes of me to not go in a very linear fashion, so follow along if you can. Wonderland energy is afoot. But I was talking about this Pluto rule, or not rules, is originally Hades, the Greek god of who rules the underworld. He does not rule death, like the moment you die. He rules where you go once your soul has vacated your physical mortal coil. So he takes your soul, or he sees your soul, and then he judges it. So Pluto energy is not just about dying and being reborn. It is about the judgment of your soul within a paradigm. So it was originally judging our souls in Capricorn energy. What do you do with your time? What mountain do you think is worth climbing with the short amount of time you have, while also still diving deep emotionally, because Capricorn is half a goat, half a fish. Now we're in Aquarius. Aquarius is the water bearer. He has a vase in his hands of water that he is delivering to a, oh my gosh, like a desert town basically that doesn't have any water. And so you are bringing much needed nourishment to other people. That is the energy of Aquarius. That's why they get the stereotype of being a humanitarian, is because they kind of have this hero complex to them. But they also, as a hero, as a leader in the sense of making things more friendly, sorry if you can hear my cat eating, a hero in the sense of making things better for humankind, there is sort of a loneliness there. And so your soul is being judged from this sort of isolated perspective, and then judged again to show, or from the perspective of, do you realize that you are not alone? That you feel alone because you're having to lead the way in some way, shape, or form, but that you are part of a larger collective that wants inevitably the same things, whether they realize it or not. I think that is also an energy that Aquarius people have, like people who have Aquarius placements, is it's sort of like the myth of Cassandra. Cassandra could, or was gifted prophecy, but she was then cursed with the fact that no one would ever believe her prophecies. And so Aquarius sees the pattern unfolding of our society, of humanity, and is constantly saying, hey, I can see the trajectory of where we're going, and if we don't veer the ship a different direction, we are running straight into that iceberg, which is interesting because, so I haven't really talked about or I don't think I have talked too much about this on my podcast, but I do talk about it a lot, obviously, on my TikTok if you're on there. But I do channel a lot of messages now through not only songs, but I've been getting a lot of things from TV shows and movies as well. And one day, about a week ago, I was noticing a lot of Titanic references, and it was kind of freaking me out. Like, I was rewatching Doctor Who, and I haven't seen it since my spiritual awakening. I watched it, I think up until late Matt Smith era, so the 11th Doctor, and that was back in like, I don't know, 2012 or something, and I haven't watched it since because I just kind of got burnt out on it. Anyways, I was thinking to myself, wasn't there a Titanic episode in Doctor Who? And I can't remember if that was first or if me seeing. I work at a library now, and there was a book on display that had to do with the Titanic. And I was like, I wonder if there's an episode of Doctor Who where they're on the Titanic that feels familiar. But I had just watched an episode where he had like done a witty rejoinder saying something about the Titanic, about how he had been on it, and it was said in such a way that made it seem like that's never going to be an episode where he's on the actual Titanic. And so I was like, oh, maybe that's all I'm remembering. No big deal. But then I never said any of this out loud. I'm just thinking this in my head, right? And I see this book and I'm like, oh, that's weird. So 2 Titanic references that could totally just be coincidences, could just be thinking about things, right? The same day, I am scrolling on TikTok and I get a video of this person going down to this like themed bathroom in a restaurant, and they're like, my friend told me to film my reaction. The theme of the bathroom was the Titanic. It literally was playing My Heart Will Go On by Celine Dion. There was a replica of the sapphire heart necklace thing. There was a projector playing Titanic. There was an ice machine. The whole thing was Titanic themed. I was like, okay, that's really weird, but I'm still chalking it up to coincidence at this point. And, but then, so I go to watch more Doctor Who, same night, mind you, go to watch more Doctor Who, and I watched like, I don't know, 3 or 4 episodes, and then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go to bed after this one. And at the end of most every episode, they have a preview of the next one. The end of the episode was him saying goodbye to Martha, and then he goes inside the TARDIS, and lo and behold, a giant ship just runs into the wall of the TARDIS, and he's like, what? It's the Titanic. And I'm like, you're joking me. You have, like, what? Anyway, so that was like really freaking me out. So I'm trying to pay attention to this episode of the Titanic, and I'm realizing it's lining up a lot with the fact that Pluto had just gone into Aquarius. And because on the Titanic, the captain of the ship is named, or not captain, I'm sorry, the owner of the ship. Like, it's like a yacht, like a luxury liner that's like takes rich aliens to go look at the Christmas customs of Earth. And so they're like up in like a spaceship that is a replica of the Titanic. And the owner of the ship's name is Capricorn. I think it's Rex Capricorn, so it's like King Capricorn. But I was like, you've gotta be kidding me. Like, Pluto just left Capricorn and entered Aquarius, or it was just about to. It was like only a few weeks ago from when I am currently recording this. And then the entire storyline was about this Rex Capricorn guy was trying to take his company down with him because he had been voted off the board of his own company, and what he was planning on doing was taking out Earth with it to ruin the reputation of his company so that nobody could win if he couldn't win. But he also had like a secret bunker in the Titanic where he could survive. And I was like, this is all hitting way too close to home. And I told my sister about it because I was like, I need somebody to witness that this is crazy. And the alignments and the messages are insane. But it helped me really understand that Capricorn energy, its empires, the things that it built, are crashing and burning. And what's happening is that the people who made these empires are realizing this and are terrified and are lashing out and doing, like, it's kind of like when you corner a wounded animal and they are like way more vicious then. That is what people who thrived during the Capricorn era are doing. They are wounded animals that are lashing out. And ooh, yeah, so it's interesting with the Titanic thing as well. It's just like you're watching, as an Aquarius person, you're trying to tell the Captain Iceberg ahead and nobody is listening. But that's where Pluto comes in, is he is judging, he is watching. Or the energy of Pluto is judging and watching, and is, like I said, it takes you down to your soul. It takes you down to your soul level and then rebuilds you from there. That is why it feels like a rebirth, is because it's like it has stripped you of your mortal coil in this area of life, and then it has fashioned you with a new one. And it is a painful process, as anyone with heavy Capricorn placements, which I do also have, can attest to. So basically, the last 16 years rocked me, and the next 20 are probably going to do the same. But the thing is, what I've been noticing and hoping and crossing my fingers for is that humanity is awakening. And I'm not just talking 5D stuff. I don't know how I feel about that at this point in time. I am still relegating all of my spiritual understanding to sort of a scientific study, where if I'm just basically making sure that something is tried and tested before I am confident and sharing it with you guys. So that's where I'm at with 5D. If that's something you believe in and you've tried and tested it and it makes sense to you, then great. But for me, I don't know. I'm 50-50 on it. But the point is, what I mean by the humanity awakening, I mean that we are, as a collective, receiving finally the truth and looking at the man behind the curtain, which is interesting that Wicked came out this year, because that is also a very huge theme. I have yet to see the movie. I really want to, and I'm going to, but I did see the Broadway, which was so good. But yes, and I also watched Wizard of Oz this year as well, because I kept getting Somewhere Over the Rainbow stuck in my head, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna watch this. And yeah, there again is sort of this Capricorn type character where we have put a human being on a pedestal. And I'm not just saying a singular human being, but where we put people on these pedestals. There's this hierarchy energy. We put them at the top of the mountain. And we say that person is the person we all look up to, that we all admire, that we all hero worship, right? But we learn they are just a human being like you and I, that they might have been born to privileges that we didn't have, but otherwise they're not gods, they are not superhumans, they're fellow people who ended up in their right place, right time, or that we put on a pedestal, and we are now having to question. We are now being judged and judging. Are we making sure that it is not just the structures we build that last, but the humans that live within them? And the way that we last is by enjoying these things. So even if an app or the internet, etc., feels Aquarian, because it was built while we as a society were holding certain things on a pedestal that we no longer do, we're having to strip these things down and rebuild them. And so I think that's why I came back to podcasts, because even though podcasts, I don't know why they feel kind of modern to me, or they feel kind of like, I don't know, like some niche thing, but technically they're one of the original forms of entertainment. Like the radio, how we had the War of the Worlds radio, and we had people telling news and doing songs and etc. Before we had TV and before we had the internet, there was the radio. So it kind of feels like we're going back to the soul. And if you think about it, it is kind of your soul because everything is stripped away. You could do video podcast, but for the most part, most people like podcasts because it's something that they can listen to while they're doing other things. So they're not watching the video most of the time, or at least I'm not. But with Pluto and Aquarius, there's a sense of authenticity. There's a sense of, is this serving humanity? But we have forgotten who our fellow humans even are and how to interact with them and to see them face to face in the flesh. And I know that's such like a boomer thing to say, but I'm not saying it in the sense that the internet isn't beautiful, because I've had so many magical things happen to me and for me because of the internet. I've learned so many things that I was not able to learn in school because of the internet. I've met people, I have experienced beautiful things because of the internet. So this is not like a the internet sucks or social media sucks. It's that until we can restructure it to better serve humans and not just structures. And the reason I say that is Capricorn is an earth sign. So it is the tangible world. So it builds the structures. It literally builds the house, but it keeps building houses and not putting people in them. And Aquarius is an air sign. It's about intellect. It is about communication. And like I said, it is the humanitarian. So it cares about, guess what? Humans. And so it's like, okay, we have all these empty structures, or we have all these structures in place, but we need to humanize them. We need to make them people friendly. And right now, social media is not people friendly. TikTok has turned into a shopping mall. It is like there's some good stuff in between. I still have a lot of really cool interactions on there, but for the most part, it's no longer pushing content and it's instead pushing product, which is very Capricorn. And notice what I just said. Content versus product. Content would be spoken, would be thought, would be air element. Product would be, I can buy these shoes, I can buy this rug, I can buy this vacuum, or I don't know, whatever is on your but it's like something you can touch, something you can feel. It's the objects, it's the clutter. And right now we're needing to share ideas with each other so that we can, well, we're at a soul level again is what I'm trying to say. And it's uncomfortable because we're stripping away our earth, which is our body, and going down to the soul. And I do feel like, I don't know if I've said, oh, you know what? I said it in a reading. That's where I'm getting a little confused, is I've done a lot of philosophical discussion in my readings and on videos on my TikTok. So I'm like, did I say that to you guys already? But there was a recent theory that I personally am aligning with, that Earth is the final step of manifestation when you're going through the elements, and it starts with fire. And fire is the spark, the spirit, the initiation. And there's a lot of people who believe this, but not everyone does. A lot of people have different understandings of the elements even. But from my experience, fire is inspiration, it's the idea. But it's very, very rare that you get an idea and it manifests instantly without going through water and air. Um, I feel like it goes from this spark of inspiration to intellectually being able to put words to it, to emotionally understanding it, and then physically grounding it. But physically grounding it is the hardest part, and it's also the slowest energy. Um, but yeah, it does feel kind of like we're starting over. I don't remember if I thought it was fire, air, water, earth, or fire, water, air, earth, but the point is that earth is last. It is the slowest. And it's the same for when I am reading my tarot as well. Anytime I get any sort of pentacles, I know that that is going to be slow. And then water energy, it's not necessarily fast or slow. It's more that it just doesn't make sense. Like there's no there's no real time. It's very Wonderland. It's very Mercury retrograde. But yes, with Pluto and Aquarius right now, I am feeling like Blue Sky is a very good example of an app actually that is doing what I think the other apps need to do. It's like I need a Blue Sky equivalent of Instagram and TikTok where it's not just a capitalist structure, it's actually out here to put the social in social media. But yeah, like we were building communities initially on TikTok, especially for those of you who have been in the spiritual community, you know that like 2020 and 2021 and even 2019 on TikTok was a huge time for witch talk, for spiritual talk, for tarot readers, for diviners, for people to share occult information in a safe place and to reach as many people as possible. And I think that's why we've had such a grand. Oh, but I think I touched on this a little bit in the beginning of the podcast as to wondering whether or not Pluto and Aquarius as a whole was going to be this strip down of social media and a rebuilding. Though after recording this podcast, I think I've just convinced myself. However, I was interested in the pattern of this. Like, when did the internet become widely available? And then I looked up when was the first social media available, and then I looked up what was like the first app on a smartphone and when was that also first available. And it was basically Aquarius, Aquarius, Aquarius. Oh, hello, Astro. She is very upset that I am paying attention to something other than her. My bad. Sorry. Anyways, with the introduction of WWW, the World Wide Web, that was in 1993, which was a year after I was born. So I'm a year older than the internet. Anyway, with the 1993, that was the middle of Saturn in Aquarius. And it might have like gone retrograde before and then went back into the middle because I'm also the middle, which is the year before. But anyway, retrogrades make everything so complicated. But Saturn was in Aquarius. And then in 1997, I forgot what it was called, but that was the first. Do I have it in my notes? Let me see. There was an app that was in 97. No, I did not write down what it was called. But basically, it was the first form of social media where people could connect with each other over the internet. And in 1997 was when Uranus was in, I think, yes, was when Uranus was in Aquarius. And Uranus is the modern ruler of Aquarius. So first we have the traditional ruler, Saturn, in Aquarius. Then we have Uranus in Aquarius right afterward. And so first we have the World Wide Web. So humans are all now sharing on equal ground tons of information across the globe, all of humanity, or, anyone with access to the internet. Then we make it even more community based by creating social media, which is an invention with Uranus, and Uranus tends to rule invention. Then we get to the first social media app that is on a smartphone, and it's actually 3 different apps around the same year. There's one called Path, there's one that's still around called Quora, and then there is Instagram. So Instagram was kind of like from then till now of 2010, but in 2010, the Aquarius energy was actually Jupiter, Neptune, Lilith, and Chiron. But all of these major Aquarius transits predating Pluto being in Aquarius were all precursors, were all foreshadowing, were all wink, wink, nudge, nudge, this is what the future's going to look like. And it's very fascinating to me that it's like Saturn in Aquarius was like, let's put some discipline and some structure into Aquarius things. And then Uranus, which has the weird ellipses around the sun that the other ones don't have, was like, yeah, and let's put a curveball on it. Let's be a little weird with it, and let's be more authentic with it. And so then, and like get a little bit more niche. And so it created social media where we could create online cliques with people around the world, like groups and communities. And then it moves into Jupiter, so it's like, let's expand upon this idea. But then we also have Chiron, so it's like something we're gonna have to constantly be learning how to heal from, because it's also going to be wounding us. And I mean, think of all the damage that Instagram and apps like Instagram have done to the psyche of all of us, but especially our youth, where it's like constantly needing external validation from people, which is a very anti-Aquarius thing. That's more of a Leo energy, so that's like where that Chiron energy is like, I just wanted to be on here where I felt like I was being understood, and we were having like these kind of weird niche understandings of each other, and now I'm having to put myself on display and in the spotlight, and it feels so uncomfortable and painful. And if I don't do things the way that the entire world wants me to, then it feels like I'm being judged by 7 billion people instead of what we're used to, which is just like maybe 100 or so. But yeah, so we've been having to heal from that basically since the inception of things like Instagram. And now Pluto has come in, and he is weighing and judging all of our actions taken from a humanitarian perspective and from a community perspective. And so social media is really going to be changing at a cellular level, and not just social media, but the way in which we as a collective interact with one another. Because I think that's the thing, is the internet showed us we're not alone, that there are other people out there, that there are aliens out there too now. But you're not alone. Your experiences. I love that comment that's left on so many TikTok videos. It's like, I've never had a unique experience ever in my life, because someone will say something just so targeted and niche, and you're like, how do you know this about me? And why are there 200 other people in the comments saying me too? That's the energy going forward, is we're all realizing that we're not alone, and we don't only need the internet and social media to see that now. It's like, I know that person exists, now I can go to them. But also, with everything happening politically, we're having to turn to things like our local communities and make things better right here, right now. And I think that's where Jupiter in Gemini is really helping us out, because as uncomfortable as it is, it makes sense that it's uncomfortable because we're uncomfortable too. We we as a society, we really did lose the art of community. I personally now live in a place that has community sort of built in, and it's so beautiful. But I have moved over 30 times in my life, and I have never, ever, ever witnessed this natural form of community where people actually actively do things for their neighbors, for their coworkers, for a person that they see on the street. Like, they actually do things. Does it still need a lot of work? Of course it does. But it has been opening my eyes to things like mutual aid and things like public resources and going to your city meetings, going to your local libraries. There are so many resources there beyond books. That we literally have a seed library at our library. And I know that there's like a community garden at one, and there's I forgot what the other ones are, but they each have like their own niche that helps out the community with something that they can give to them for free. We give away free seeds. And then we have all of these programs that are either free or like $10, and which is actually rare. Those events are usually more like, I don't know, like specialty events. Like we had a Halloween ball, and the $10 was to help cover like the catering fee, but everything else was like donated. So utilize your local resources and become part of your community. That is what's going to be very important going forward. I feel like with the way that social media is changing, or has changed just before moving into Aquarius, it sort of robbed us of the online version of it. And now it's like, okay, now we got to do this face to face again. We have to we have to start supporting our local shops. It was really cool. My stepmom was talking about how she needed, I think, screws or a nail or something. And she was like, you know what I did? I went to my local hardware store so that I didn't go to like Ace Hardware or something. And she's like, I wanted to support my local shops. And I'm like, yes, I love that. And I was thinking, like, we could be looking up our local dairies. We could be looking up our local butcher, our local produce, our going to our tailors to fix our clothes so we're not over consuming. We could be going to cobblers to fix our shoes. So again, we're not over consuming. It's the same pair of shoes, and it probably costs the same amount as buying a new pair or less sometimes. But I think we're kind of going back to the basics so that we can learn them again. And it's like that phrase that I say literally all the time: you learn better, you do better. And right now, we're getting to do better in a way that can help serve the people and help us innovate and modernize in ways that are sustainable and not just good for people, but for Mother Earth. And I just love seeing how we're trying again. Like, it's weird because we're all so tired. I can see it. We're all exhausted, but it's also like the people who care. It's like we've had a lot of fire lit under us where it's like, you know what? I want to change the trajectory of my career so that it's helping people, not just me. And because I'm realizing when it was just me, that wasn't helping either. So I might as well do something that helps everybody. And then hopefully it helps somebody. Because I had so many friends just before this transit who were in quote unquote stable jobs, or on the outside. and they were falling apart and like looking for jobs and couldn't find anything. And it's like, yeah, because those structures are failing and dying. And all of the Aquarius placements are like, we've been saying this. It's the Cassandra energy again. But yeah, I think these next 20 years are going to be really challenging, but also empowering. And I think it's going to be something that we all need to like look out for each other, because I don't want you to feel alone, because you're not. Because if you're here 40 minutes into this episode and this has resonated with you, then I care too. You're not the only one who cares. You're not the only one who wants to make the world a better, kinder, and more loving place. And that shouldn't be radical. And it won't be at some point. But there's a lot of healing and restructuring and rebuilding that needs to be done. We're souls, we're little spirits in the underworld right now that are recorporealizing. Is that a word? We're becoming corporeal again, but we're having to like build bones and sinew and muscle and vessels and fill them with blood and then put the flesh and be alive again, the breath in the lungs, but we have to start at ground zero and move forward. Oh, and to round back to the Titanic, at the end they do save the world. They have to sacrifice a lot of people, but they save Earth, and the Titanic does not crash. So the first Titanic did crash, but the second one didn't. So it's like we don't have to repeat history. This has happened before. We have all been here before. Not just America, but other countries have been in dark times like these before. And so we have something to look back on for reference. We literally have an open book test right now, and we deserve to ace it. So if you want to come look at my paper and I'll look at yours, I'm down for the win-win scenario there. That's community. Bring your calculator to the math test. I don't care. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say today about Pluto in Aquarius. I am genuinely so happy to be back. I think that this is what I needed, was to recalibrate and to not continue creating under the death of Pluto in Capricorn. It's not that there wasn't any wisdom there, because there was, but with Pluto in Aquarius, it just feels better to make things knowing that they are in, like, permanently in the new paradigm, that I don't have to worry. It's just going to fall away with the rest of Pluto in Capricorn. But I do want to leave off with talking about legacy. I'd been thinking about the midheaven in astrology, which is the top of your chart. It's the highest point in the sky when you were born. And so it's supposed to be like our peak in life, like the legacy that we leave behind. And that is very Pluto, very Saturn, very Capricorn and Aquarius. They care a lot about what they leave behind, about how their soul will be judged. And I'm not saying you have to believe that your soul's going to go anywhere, or that it's going to the underworld to see Hades. But you can have that judgment right now for yourself. You can think, if my soul was going to go somewhere, do I think it would go to a good place? Do I think that it, based off of my actions that I took, not what people did to me, not the situations I had to go through, but the choices that I have made, do I think that I deserve to be in a good place? And not in like a martyr way. Don't be hard on yourself. Life has been built purposely to fatigue us and to make us make horrible decisions. But at the end of the day, when you make decisions, is it because you want a kinder and more loving world? But what I wrote down was, perhaps it is a mistake to believe that we can design our legacy masterfully and to our liking. To pursue a single purpose as though it will be lifelong should be changed to follow one's values of the purpose and allowing for changeability. The adventure, the journey, the randomness will have a point, but it won't be drawn intentionally by you. Instead, it will be drawn by your audience posthumously. Even if people recognize you during your life for part of your legacy, we will never know the whole until all is said and done. So with that in mind, go forth and make sure that your present feels just as full of intention as your desired future would be. Because you never know what it's going to hold. You only know the choices that you're making currently, and you only know whether or not you're going to change based off of your value system. And I am choosing from here on forth, granted I feel like I always have, but I definitely am now, choosing kindness, not niceness, kindness, choosing love, choosing accountability for myself and for us all. So thank you for joining me for the first episode of season 2. I'm going to try to do, I think I set it up for 2 to 4 episodes per month. I will always keep you updated. I will be on Blue Sky. I probably will still be on TikTok just because it's easy to get information out there. So if you want to follow me on there, please do. I'm very communicative, so if you comment, I will definitely get back to you. Instagram, I feel kind of weird about, and I am also going to try to have these episodes on YouTube available. Maybe that's where you're listening right now. Again, I'm very communicative, so leave comments and I will reply. And there is going to be an offer coming soon that I am still working out the details. But until then, follow me on socials and I will announce on there. And you have a lovely time and space wherever you are.